I'm Empress Nell, manager and director of the Valkyries of Arcadia. I make content with the Valkyries. I manage, and I'm also a TV show host for the Lab Video Game TV.
And you guys already know who I am. I'm Triforce Johnson, CEO and founder of Empire Arcadia. Thank you guys. You are watching Scene World's podcast.
It's the Scene World podcast. I'm AJ in my garage, and that's Jörg over there. What's happening?
Well, in a minute, we will be talking to Charles Cecil.
Charles Cecil, yes, indeed.
From Revolution Software.
Yep.
One of the pioneers of point-and-click adventure, known for Beneath the Steel Sky and Broken Sword.
Mm-hmm.
And recently he released via Kickstarter the Broken Sword Reforged edition, and we will talk about that.
And this will be the epic conclusion to our three-part. What did we call it last time?
Hat trick.
Yeah, the hat trick of big name company
developers.
Stuff. Yeah, developers. Yeah, so we'll put in that little noise again.
Exactly, which was actually your own noise, just put over some filters to it,
which was amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
so
why not making the sound effect based on what we already have?
So before we get to that, though, we have some news.
Exactly. Well, I got quite some news because, oh my God, I mean, the last episode was already 3 weeks ago, so a lot has happened.
Yep.
Do you want to start? Should I start?
I'll start. I only got one that I see right here. Okay. Which is that Side Projects Lab has released. Hang on, I gotta look it up here. Okay, has released Blue 64, which is a plug-and-play Bluetooth adapter. So it plugs into the keyboard header inside the computer. It controls the keyboard lines, emulates keystrokes and joystick inputs. So that's so the idea is to support Bluetooth controllers and a Bluetooth keyboard. So the C64 can be wireless.
Nice. Well, it doesn't sound like the analog headers would be supported because that is using the SID chip. So it means no pedals and no mouse support.
Well, maybe or yeah, probably not. But yeah, for other stuff though, so it controls to the keyboard lines, or it connects to the keyboard lines, and then will that work for a port 2 joystick?
Yeah. Port 2 and port 1 are both also controlled by the same CIA.
Right. Same CIA, yeah.
Yeah, CIA. And also the port 1 and port 2 both have lined up similar keys.
Okay.
And that is actually why games never use AWSD like on the PC. Because that doesn't work?
Well, I know that it's been a long time since I've coded for joysticks. I know that port 1 uses a lot of the same like lines as the keyboard, so you can kind of substitute movements on there with the keyboard. But port 2
is actually why newer games all use port 2 as the main joystick.
Yeah.
But port 2 also has some shared lines.
Right. Okay.
I mean, honestly, it's interesting because if you have early games from 84 and late and newer, 84 and before, developers didn't care and used port 1, despite the extra work.
I think a lot of what it became was as games got more complicated, you'd end up a lot of games you would end up using a joystick and the keyboard. And if you do that, then the
not
port
on
1,
the C64, except Flight Simulator or something.
Almost every game that I have uses both at some point, or a lot of the games that I've played. But either way,
then those are simulator games or something, because other genres never use the keyboard. Never.
a lot
The
of RPGs
only
use that
game
too.
that ever used the keyboard was Davis Midnight Magic and Chase HQ2. And Chase HQ2 used the spacebar because it was made for the C64 game station that actually had a joystick with a second joystick port, so they used the spacebar instead of normal C64s. But other games never used the
I mean,
keyboard.
I'm thinking of my all-time favorites. You got Space Rogue, keyboard and joystick. Sentinel Worlds, keyboard and joystick. Starflight, keyboard and joystick.
Well, this is it. Flying and simulator games.
But Starflight's not a simulator. Starflight's an RPG. So is Sentinel Worlds. That's not a simulator. That's just an RPG game.
Okay.
Or
I'm
any
not-
of the
I never played RPGs.
the Gold Box series, the TSR Gold Box series. They're all joystick and keyboard.
Never used.
You don't need to use a joystick with them. With most of them, you can either use keyboard or joystick. But a lot of people.
I
use
never
both.
used. I never played RPGs, so no idea.
Well, it's just, as I was saying, if you're using both, it can be confusing to, it can interfere if you're using port 1 and the keyboard, because they use a lot of the same stuff. So you'd use port 2 in that instance, so they would have two independent, they're not going to interfere with each other.
But port 2 still has that, because as a proof of concept, if you use autofire and you forgot to disable that, you weren't able to type in load.
Right.
It would end up as low Q.
Yes.
Bullshit.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you had less interference, but you still had them.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that you can support digital input with the keyboard header, but not, as I said, not analog input, because that's controlled using the SID chip.
Right.
Yeah. So that means mouse and pedals don't work.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Which also means you can't use it with Scene World, because if those lines are missing, then you get jitter. For the mouse, you get jitter. Jitter. Yeah. That means the mouse is moving uncontrollably because it's missing the analog lines, because the Maxis is actually not using digital joystick commands. It's actually using analog mouse joystick.
You could use a joystick with it, though. You use a joystick with it, though.
Right, but we are using the mouse joystick emulation.
Right.
Yeah. And I know that because we had the problem last Gamescom that one of the C64s we tried first had the SID chip missing. That means the analog signals were missing because the SID chip socket was empty. And that resulted in the Maxis being uncontrollable because the mouse arrow would jitter.
Right.
So we are not using digital joystick commands. We are only using analog. Yeah.
Okay.
Which makes sense because, as you know, we are using Mr. Mouse, which is also the system Lodestar used, and patched joystick on top of it.
Right.
So, because it's mainly a mouse-based graphic interface, and keyboard controls and joystick controls were added on top. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Why not reusing something that's already there,
Yeah, of course.
And also, we wanted to make it as compatible as possible with any hardware that you can run on the C64. So I guess that is why Robin decided for that, because he knew it would work.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And another way you can actually figure out that this is the case, the joystick has the same acceleration like a mouse. So if you move the joystick in one direction, you can see how the arrow is actually speeding up from one side of the screen to the other. This way you can see it's an analog input that's gradually getting faster, and not digital, which is like full signal or no signal.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, a bit of nerd stuff, but I mean, it's amazing that that nobody else ever did something similar to us. But hey,
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. So we were on talking about Bluetooth. Okay.
Yes.
You mentioned something else that is actually happening before the recording from the Retro Recipe show.
Well, I saw it on the Retro Recipes show, but it's not specifically to do with him. Which is that the C64X, I believe it's called, is back. So this was, look it up real quick. So this was a PC, a PC in a C64 case, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
It was originally made by Barry Altman, who ran Commodore USA back around 2010 or 2011 or so.
And he actually died, if I don't remember, shortly afterwards, right?
Right. Yeah. And so, from what I gather, somebody bought, after he passed away, somebody purchased his old stock, and now I believe it's My Retro Computer is the company. They are now producing a new version of the C64X, which is a PC in a licensed C64. So this is an actual, and this is something that we've seen quite a bit mentioned in reference to this, is that it is a licensed Commodore product, licensed by the people that own the rights to Commodore. So it's an actual Commodore product. It's a PC in a C64 looking case. I'm looking for specs here. And it's so it is there's three versions of it. There's a bare bones, which I think is just the case. And then there's like other ones where you can configure what it's got, and they're all out of stock from what I'm seeing online here. So I guess they're selling pretty well. The high end one is an i5, a 9th generation i5, NVIDIA GTX 1650 graphics, 4 gigabytes of memory.
But 1650 is pretty old, actually.
Yeah. 8 gigs of memory, expandable up to 64 gigs, a 512 gig M2 hard drive. Yeah, so it's. I mean, and that was the thing with the first version of it, is that it was already out of date when it came out. It was basically like notebook parts in a C64 case.
1615 is not a notebook, but
right. Yeah. Right. But nevertheless.
But still, it's like
it's integrated.
It's like 7-8 years old.
Yeah. Right. So it looks like they're going to have new stock by the end of February.
And
hopefully
it runs with an updated spec, because maybe. why would you want 7 years old hardware, honestly?
Yeah, and it's running it doesn't run Windows, it runs Commodore OS Vision, which is a version of Linux with a lot of 2003 desktop effects, kind of. I don't mean to. I'm not trying to kind of poo-poo it. It's just sort of a I don't know what you would do with it, because it's not it's not running a tremendous amount of, like, you can't just. I guess you could just put Windows on it if you wanted to.
Yeah, but only Windows 10 officially, because Windows 11 will not work because it doesn't have TPM.
Oh,
and
okay,
Windows 10 is getting out of business next year, November, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So you basically can run Windows on it for a year, and then, woo.
Yeah, so it uses mini ITX boards, and yeah, I don't see much else in the way of specs but you also have to, be concerned about the amount of space and everything. So, because
ITX is pretty small.
Yeah,
ITX is pretty small form factor. That's right. Yeah.
We'll put a link in the description where you can check it out. Again, from what I can see of their order pages, they're all sold out as of now, and should be getting new stock by the end of February. You still can buy a Commodore branded mechanical keyboard. That's in there still. That's still available.
Nice.
But, yeah. So,
yeah. I guess you can pre-order if the new stock comes in February, right?
I guess. Sure.
Okay. Well, so my news.
The extreme version, the 64X Extreme, is an Intel Celeron.
Extreme Celeron is extreme. Yeah. Oh gosh.
Apparently, Intel UHD graphics, 4 gigabytes of memory, 256 gig M2 drive. Yeah, it's I didn't think of a Celeron as being particularly extreme, but then you only have Extreme and Ultimate. Those are the two different editions. Either an empty case or Extreme or Ultimate. So Extreme is the lower end, Ultimate is the higher end.
And the higher end itself is 8 years. Okay.
Yeah, the higher end itself is the i5 with the GTX 1650.
I mean, i5 was like i5. There's now i7, and I was like, okay.
I mean, there's i9s out.
Yeah, right. Anyway, other news. A new Game Boy game has been released. Lunar Lancer from Jonas Fischbach, which actually can be downloaded from itch.io, like many stuff. And also from the same place, itch.io, a new C64 game has been released. Portal Buster.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. From somebody called Dr. Mortal Wombat.
Okay.
What a name.
Right there.
Yeah. Other news. The Crew racing game that is online only because Ubisoft was like that is actually getting a fan-made work in progress server emulator. Just a little of background story. The backlash when the game from 2014, The Crew, has been disabled, the server has been disabled, the shitstorm at Ubisoft has been so big that they announced, okay, we will patch in an offline mode for single player in The Crew 2 and The Crew Motofest, which are the two successors of The Crew.
Right.
So, but still, they wouldn't reverse their decision and not patch in a single player without online requirements for The Crew. So now fans are on it. Yeah.
Yeah, the fans.
And the article from the homepage that we will link to actually links also to a Discord server where you can get more news and participate.
Cool.
In the project. Yes, well, and there are a lot of other games being delisted as well. Little Big Planet 3 on the PS4 and the Little Big Planet DLCs are also removed on the PlayStation Store.
Okay.
And also, Forza Horizon 4 is delisted on December 15th. So a lot of games are delisted this year.
And why are we delisting them again?
Microsoft said they are delisting it because the license for the cars and all the material in the game actually expired with the license grantor.
Let me tell you something. Yeah, this has happened. This has been happening for a while. One of my favorite car games ever is Dirt 2. It's not new. It's like a 2012 game, something like that.
I know. I have it in my Steam as well.
Yeah, right. You cannot get it anymore. And it was the license, I think, with the music that expired, not necessarily the cars. The music expired.
I know the same happened with Driver San Francisco from Ubisoft, also because of the music. Yeah.
Yep. So all these games, if you've got them already, great. You can still, I've got Dirt 2.
But only if the game doesn't require a server for always online for single player.
Right. Well, Dirt 2, like I bought that through the Apple App Store. So I can still access it, I can download it. I can't play it because it's not 64-bit. And of course, Apple killed all those things. I could take an old computer and put it in an older OS and play it on that, but who the hell wants to do that? But yeah, there's a lot of games like that where it's like, it just seems so silly to me that like you can get like and if I want to play it on my PC, because my PC has, that can still run 32-bit apps. I can't get it on there because it was, it's not available on Steam or anywhere else, and I can't download Apple App Store stuff on a PC.
Right. The only way it works is this Xbox. Certain Xbox games you can download from the Microsoft Store on Windows. Yeah.
But if you're on there, if you're buying like, Dirt 4, Dirt 5, or whatever the hell is out now, it's like, hey, I want to go back and play the older ones. Nope, sorry, you can't do it.
So the only way is actually either buying a physical copy, which is hard to get.
Good luck finding one. Yeah, good luck finding one.
Or you have to go to the gray market of second-hand seller pages, where you can get Steam codes for triple 4/5 of times than the original game price.
Would redeeming a Steam code still make it available even though it's not listed?
Yes, because Steam doesn't remove it from the servers, so you can still download it if you have a Steam code.
Right, I figured maybe if you had already purchased it, like if I buy it on Steam on my Mac, I go over to another machine, I can download it.
Because somebody else got the code, but he never redeemed it on Steam.
Okay, so I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay.
There are a few exceptions though, and that's not Steam related. For example, EA, when they lost the FIFA license for their soccer games, now they removed the game even from the servers. That means if you don't have it installed right now and you have a code to redeem it in the EA app, you can't, even though you bought a code, because they removed it from the server. But Valve never removes games from Steam servers.
Can we take a detour just to talk about? So you've got the Steam store, you've got the Apple App Store. Okay, it's fine, whatever. The Epic Game Store, whatever. EA,
not very liked except for their free games.
Basically, yeah. Or Chinese games that somehow miraculously appear in your folder.
Well, I mean, what basically happens is Epic makes exclusive deal for 2 or 3 years, and then when that exclusive deal is over, the publisher is going back to Steam because Steam has the bigger audience.
But now EA, our favorite, used to be the Origin store.
Right. And now it's EA.
Now it's EA. And can we talk about how bullshit the EA app is? How fucking terrible this thing is. Because I'm sitting here, so I've got a MacBook Pro, okay? Right. I have integrated and discrete graphics. Cool. Right. So not most of the time, the last year or so, I haven't been doing much else other than being home. So it's been plugged in downstairs, hooked up to Thunderbolt stuff and an array of monitors and whatnot. Lately, though, I've been unhooking it and bringing it out places upstairs or down or outside or whatever, my garage, whatever, just to kind of get out of my office area there. And I noticed that when I turned the computer on, suddenly it would tell me like, "Oh, we're using the NVIDIA GPU, not the Intel." I'm like, "Well, why? We're on battery." And I look, and it's because the EA store is running in the background, even though I never wanted it to. I never used the damn thing. It's sitting in the background there, running no matter what, using the discrete GPU, not the integrated. It's pulling like 80% off that freaking graphics, just to run a background process for a stupid app store that's not even open.
Well, I never have it in my auto start, so
I don't either. I never put it in auto start either. It's not the app store itself. It's like the updating daemon that's running in the background. It's like,
there's
why?
no updating daemon on Windows, not on my machine.
There isn't on mine anymore. I went in there, I found that thing, and I got rid of it. But I'm sure if the next time I open up that EA store to play The Sims or whatever the hell I got on there, I think that's about all they sell is The Sims. If I ever open that thing up again, it's going to put it right back, and then I got to go digging through folders to get rid of it.
Yeah, exactly, because what Epic, not Epic, what EA and Ubisoft does is actually, when you start a game you own on Steam or bought the license from on Steam, it will go to the external store, open the store app, and starting the game from there. Despite the game's file are installed in Steam. That's unfortunately how it is.
So on mine, I can actually, with a lot of games, I can start them. I can go to my Steam apps and whatnot, and I can just run the app and not run Steam. But I think with EA, because all I've got from EA is The Sims, and if for some chance I want to go and mess around with my Sims, which is not an often thing, it will, before it opens, it'll start opening the app, then it'll stop, then it'll open up EA and update everything, because you know the Sims that ran fine a week ago won't run fine now anymore. Yeah. And then it'll open it. But as soon as that EA store is opened again, it's like, oh, here's this thing we got to put in the background again. That's going to take up a ludicrous amount of energy. It's going to make your battery last 6 minutes, because we've got an updating daemon running, doing nothing in the background because there's nothing to update.
Yeah, but
EA, get your shit together.
Ubisoft is the same way. What can I say?
Come on, man. You used to make Skate or Die. You made fucking good ass games.
I know.
And now you're doing this? Now you're giving us this shit? Come on.
I know. Yeah, I mean,
that's my thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah. Well, more news from the gaming world. Hogwarts Legacy, the game that was hated a lot in the last 2 years because of J.K. Rowling, is actually getting a definitive edition. That's currently in development.
I never watched or read the Harry Potter series.
I did. It was my first English book.
Was it racist?
No.
All I've seen from the movies, I've seen pictures of the things that are the creatures that are running the banks.
No, the thing is not that it is in the book or the movies. The thing is that she said...
I know. She's horrible.
She spoke about it on X.
J.K. Rowling is a horrible, horrible human being.
Yeah.
But I've never actually watched or read any of the stuff, so I don't know.
I did, because the Sorcerer's Stone was the first English book I read to improve my English. So
really,
yeah. One book was my dictionary in one hand, and the other book was the Sorcerer's Stone.
Oh, dag.
Yeah. Must have been the year 2001 or something, like 23 years ago.
Yeah. Was that the first book you read? The first novel you read?
The first English novel, yeah.
First one. Did you read any like German novels early?
Yeah, obviously at school and stuff, right?
What was the first thing you read for the purpose of reading? I remember that the first book I read, I
I had no idea.
I think I was in 5th or 6th grade, and I read Misery by Stephen King, which is, when you're like,
but it
12,
was some
11,
German
12
book.
years
It
old.
was
That's
a German book.
Oh, yeah.
It was a German book for sure, but I don't remember.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We always read these stupid stories in school that I always hated, but like somebody brought in this horror novel, and I was like, I'm not going to get outread by that schmuck.
Oh, I remember
so I went
now.
And got the
book was actually called Back Then It Has Been Friedrich, which is actually a German book about a Jewish child having a friendship with a German child during Nazi times and stuff.
Oh, okay. All right, interesting.
Yeah.
Put that on our Scene World Book Club.
School. It was for school, so it must have been, yeah.
No, I mean like what was the first thing you read for entertainment, for your own self, not as a school?
I don't remember. Anyway.
Yes. Anyway.
Other news.
Sidetracked. Man, we're off. Other news today.
Other news. Aspyr announced Tomb Raider 5-7 is getting a remaster. You can already pre-order it.
5-7?
Yes. Sorry. No. 4-6. My mistake.
Oh! I thought. So Tomb Raider 4, Tomb Raider 5, Tomb Raider 6.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you said Tomb Raider 4, 2, 6, like 3 numbers, like number 426.
No,
I didn't know there were that many out.
No.
It's a popular series.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're getting remastered.
Yes.
Nice.
After the 1, 2, 3 was very successful. 1, 2, 3.
Cool.
You get it?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now they make 4 to 6.
How many are there?
Oh, they are still making them. So
I know.
I don't know. Tons.
They stopped making numbers. Now it's just like Shadow of the Tomb Raider or some nonsense.
I know.
Like that.
I know.
Trying to confuse you.
I know. Which is actually fine that Charles Cecil, who we will talk to later, actually is still using numbers.
Yeah.
Hey. So, anyway, so, well, the thing goes on. I mean, there's a lot of game news recently.
Yeah.
Starting on November the 15th, Steam will no longer display games to customers in Germany if the game is missing a valid age rating. And the age rating has been automatically asked by any publisher since the year 2000. So since the year 2000 you put a game to Steam, you will be asked to put in a rating.
Right.
Either from the German USK or their Steam own rating, which is actually by German law, compatible to the USK rating.
Right.
And that means there are a potential 23,000 games in danger of being unlisted and not available for German customers anymore. Because to this date, 23,000 games haven't been rated, despite Steam, sending out reminders and stuff. Publishers didn't do it. That means there will be 23,000 more games that you can only get if you go to the gray market and getting keys from there.
Everyone start going through Steam and downloading all the games you always wanted to download, but never did.
That's actually what a lot of people from Germany will do now. Exactly. Yeah.
I got so many games in my Steam library that were like related to this podcast, and I've played them once. And there's maybe like 3 games that I actually bought and downloaded.
So what
myself.
will you do? What will you do with Broken Sword?
I don't know. I'll play it. Maybe I'll do a review of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you do a review of it, then perhaps you should coordinate with Devon, because he will do a review of it.
Yeah.
So perhaps 2 views of the same game in the same video could be interesting.
You'll have a really a good heartfelt review from Devin, and then you'll have AJ gets confused and dies lots of times in a game with me.
Which is interesting because you always downplay your reviews, but if you look in the comments to the review videos, people are loving them, you know?
Oh well, yeah, because it's silly.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be sad to not pay a homage to Charles Cecil now that we had the interview and heard how much
definitely
sweat and passion he put into it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So perhaps you will be not too silly on that review.
I mean, so I'm not, it's not. I don't. So I'm not. I don't shit on things when I review them. Like like okay, let's look at Rogue Spirit.
The Commodore guys hated your pet phone review though.
Right, and I tried my best. I even said in there that I'm giving these guys every benefit of the doubt. I understand.
They never talked to us ever since you published that.
Yeah, well. I didn't. Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of money for what is essentially a 2-year-old phone at that point. But like Rogue Spirit, I did that review for that game. Okay, yeah, I went off the rails a little bit. The weirdly shaped heads still give me nightmares, but as far as the game is concerned, I mean, the graphics were amazing. It was a great atmosphere. I thought it was. I liked the game. It was a good game. Like that's. Tackle Shin. I never did a review of that, but we did get. I do have the game. It's a fun game. It's on my phone. I play with it when I'm killing some time. It's not bad. I like it.
Don't forget the wrestling game.
The wrestling game, yeah, that was fun.
I found funny is that you actually customize the guy to look like a version of yourself.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I don't want to be. I don't like the. Like if I'm going to play a game, I don't want to play as somebody. I want to play as myself. I never liked the whole this is the avatar of your character, but he's somebody that's not at all like you. It's like no. I want it to be me in there. So yeah, I made my own silly character, and then went and did I think I got my ass kicked one time. I don't know.
You did.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean that was fun. I enjoyed that game. I was giggling all through that. It was great. And that was I recorded that at a time that was not, Laura was in my fiance, for anyone that isn't aware, was diagnosed with breast cancer last year, and while I was making that review, she was in surgery. Like that review was my how am I going to get through the next 9 hours of my life waiting for the results of this.
Wow.
So I played that game and recorded it, and then it was like, all right, it was fantastic. I enjoyed it for as much as I can enjoy anything at that point. So yeah, my reviews, I'm not shitting on things when I make reviews. It's just that I can't sit for a variety of hours playing games and not get stupid.
Well, that's the problem with Program Sport. You can't get stupid with that game because
Watch me.
of the way the point and click genre works. I mean, as I said during the interview, not to take things ahead here, but it's one of the unfunniest point and click adventures that you can play because it starts with a murder.
I'll find a way to make it funny. I'll find a way. There's no. I can't play a game and not start making jokes halfway through. Oh, hello. A bird just came in here, landed on the table, looked at me, and then left again.
Nice. Yeah.
That was weird.
Podcast, dude.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, you got the possibility. Let me know. I mean, Devin will anyway do his review. I mean, we can do 2 reviews, no problem.
Yeah.
It's up to you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, well, gaming news doesn't stop here.
Oh, we got more.
There is shipping of Xenocrisis for the Game Boy Advanced, and that starts November 8th. So if you want to have it before Christmas, go to the Bitmap Bureau shop and order it before November 8th. and then you get it before Christmas. And we had Mike Tucker from Bitmap Bureau beforehand, and perhaps a bit of a spoiler. If you are a fan of the Game Boy Advanced as a platform, you will be very happy about what Charles says about Broken Sword 2.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the Game Boy, this isn't necessarily Game Boy related, but Tronimal, who we spoke to a couple episodes back,
Your Critterhouse.
Yes. His album Robonaut is out.
Yeah, digitally at least. Yeah, physical is still in production. He actually made the stretch goal of getting a better packaging.
Right.
Yeah, and he made an update yesterday that he found a printing company doing it in low quantities, so it will have the original size of the original Virtual Boy packaging.
Right. Yeah, I got an email a couple of days ago saying that the digital files will be ready to download.
Exactly.
So that's available. That's ready. So if you're if you're a backer, then go get it.
Yeah,
it's good stuff. It's really good stuff. I enjoyed it.
And if you are not a backer, it's too late. Too late.
Yeah, you're out of luck.
Yeah,
you have to go to that gray market again.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned it. We mentioned it in the Gamescom special episode before that even, and linked it, so people had enough time to buy it.
Definitely, absolutely.
So, yeah.
What else you got?
Well, and also I got from Novobox, who we interviewed at Gamescom. This is a French company that does still packaging for retro gaming, for physical releases. They have been at the Marcha Classic International Film Festival, and they actually they were presenting a wide range of products we create. One example is the special edition of Lethal Weapon media books, beautifully packaged in a sturdy slipcase.
Lethal Weapon, like the Mel Gibson movie?
Exactly. So they produced a special edition. And we have the permission from their customer to show the video that they presented of that special edition. It's very beautiful. Which is interesting because many episodes, also the episode with Charles Cecil, we mentioned like physical edition.
Yeah.
So
Eric's a big proponent of the physical edition. He likes to have the box with all the material.
I know, yeah. So I bought, for example, 4 years ago, I bought Flight Simulator 2020 to get the box edition, but because I didn't want to use the Windows Store version, I actually kept the box edition myself and sold the key to AJ.
Yeah.
And then for that money, I bought the Steam version because I prefer to have it on Steam. So
yeah,
bit of a trading there. Yeah. And I do that quite often because sometimes you get physical games for the Epic Store, but I don't want to have it on the Epic Store. So I actually sell the Epic Store key on eBay, and from that money I buy the Steam version. But I still have the physical edition.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, it works. It's a bit complicated. I would prefer to have the choice what store you want to have the key in. But unfortunately, that's not possible. Anyway, that's from Novobox. And also, another news is another project, unfortunately, that halted was a huge mod that aimed to create the entirety of the original Fallout in the Fallout's 4 engine called Vault 16 got suspended for personal reasons.
Oh.
So the project is no more, unfortunately. Which is sad, because summer this year they actually released a tech demo.
When was the original Fallout released?
Oh, I don't remember. Don't remember what year that was. But it's supposed to be a classic.
Yeah, no, I know it's a classic. I'm just curious how old it was that it would need like a remaster with the new engine, you know?
I mean, obviously a bit. I mean, we can ask Alexa. Alexa, when was the original Fallout released?
Das Original Fallout wurde 1997 veröffentlicht.
Alexa, stop. Okay, 1997.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. Yeah, that's yeah, that could use a remaster, I think. Yeah, 97. Didn't realize it was that long ago. Holy crap.
Yeah. Which is also interesting that she answered me in German despite I asked her in English, because I set up my Alexa to support both languages, but for some reason she decided to answer in German for whatever reason. So 1997.
Wow. Yeah. 1997 RPG, yeah. Wow. Oh, yeah. No, I'm looking at the screenshots of this. This is definitely 1997.
Definitely 1997.
Oh, dag. Wow. Wow. Yeah, that could go for because it's big. I mean, Fallout is really big now, especially there's a TV show. There's
I know
all the stuff going on. So it's like, yeah, that would be ripe for like a remaster at this point.
Well, I got more news. The game Overshoot, that is actually well, kind of a rock and roll racing clone from Spain. And I looked it up because we mentioned it before when it was newly released, and the developer actually wrote to me like, no, I'm not from Brazil, I'm from Spain. So I did that wrong back then, but now I looked it up. He's actually from Spain according to his LinkedIn. And he decided to make this prior commercial game after 2 years free.
Oh, really?
And not only does that mean that obviously the commercial multiplayer servers will be shut down, but he made the code for the server program open, available for everybody. That means you can still play multiplayer if you download the server software and host your own server.
Oh, okay, cool, nice.
Yeah. Right. And the last gaming news, so many gaming news this episode.
Took us a while.
The last gaming news, actually, people are getting pissed of how long the Patreon Kickstarter is taking. Same old story.
That's still going? That's still happening?
Yeah,
I thought it was done. I thought you got your thing.
No, I'm still waiting since
really
2 years. No.
I thought you got the Paprium thing.
Yeah. I got the Paprium thing in 2020 when it was released for the Mega Drive. But we had him for the new Kickstarter where he made newer versions for the Game Gear.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we had the composer of the Game Gear version on the show.
Right.
And he was making a version for the Dreamcast, for Switch, for PC, Steam, and that's not out yet. So some French people actually started a homepage about this case again.
You don't hear much about, like in the retro scene or the demo scene or any of that stuff. You don't hear a lot about the French. There's a big group in Germany. There's a lot of people in the UK. There's a lot of people, Sweden, Norway, Denmark.
And then there's watermelon, the infamous watermelon from France.
Is like just not there. France, like no one there does that, and maybe this is why.
Which is not true. We had Procon Studio on.
Yes.
For their first English interview.
No, I didn't say it doesn't happen. I just said it's not as big as it is elsewhere. You know, you don't hear much about it.
Which is
similarly to how you don't hear much about, like, there isn't much of like a Japanese retro scene, even though they had these machines too. They had C64s and Amigas and whatever. They had all that stuff, but no one's doing anything with it.
Which is probably because a lot of people are like, we are not doing it in English.
Well, they don't have to do it in English. I don't care. I'll watch a demo from Japan. They're NTSC. Come on, guys. We could use all the NTSC people we can get. So yeah. Japan, come on in. You're NTSC. We'd love to have you as part of the group.
But we had the game preservation on from Japan on the podcast.
Right.
And they told us it's actually a cultural thing. But it's past. Nobody cares about preserving.
I've been told. I've got a friend who is of Japanese descent who goes there fairly often. There are vending machines where you can get like retro hardware, old Game Boys and stuff, just out there, just around. Like apparently
but on the large scale, it's not.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess it's not that big of a thing.
Right.
But
and that is why you don't hear. One, you have the language barrier, and second, it's not a cultural. They are not generally interested. While in Germany, Europe, and USA, you have the whole retro movement. You know,
it's a genre at this point. It's a genre of game and
genre. Right. It's not the case. Yeah. Anyway, we derailed from France to Japan.
We're all over we're all over the place.
Anyway, the homepage is called prepriumcase.com. Ooh. Yeah. And also there are rumors I've read on the Kickstarter in the comment section that the guy who coded the GG version, he's actually running a store at the address 2 mines. That's the number 2 mines.fr. And the rumors say you can write to him and ask him about your copy of Peprium for the Genesis, because he's selling Sega Genesis games on his store. So I don't know if that is true. I didn't try to contact him yet. I will do this after we finish this recording and see what he says about this rumor that he is the coder of the game, the Game Gear version.
Okay.
So that's from Watermelon, Fonzie's Criminal Gods.
The ongoing drama of Watermelon games.
Yeah, and of course somebody else said that he heard that he actually pulled the money from the Kickstarter and went away.
They've been saying that since the first Kickstarter.
I know, right?
I mean,
that's going on since 2012. You know, I know. And suddenly, Vaporware Peprium was released for the Mega Drive, despite tons of people said like it will never happen, you know.
But again, even if it doesn't happen, even if it never gets to be made, right? Like it was just a pipe dream, a vaporware thing, and you've said this lots of times. Kickstarter, you're investing in a project. You're not buying a project. You're not buying something. You're investing money into creating it. And if it doesn't get created, oh well, you lose. You know, you pays your money, you takes your chances. You know, it's like that's you invested in something, it failed. Oh well, that's part of the game. That's part of the whole deal. You know, they're not guaranteeing anything.
I mean, it was one of the most successful Kickstarters. He almost made $1 million.
Right. Yeah.
Almost $1 million. Imagine that. Holy cow.
Yeah. Right. And then he kind of vanished for a bit, but But from we talked to him. It wasn't like he was hiding or anything. You had no problem finding him. You called his mom or something.
Right? No, I called his mom. Yes.
Yeah.
I was speaking to his mom. That was interesting because I was like, okay, an elderly woman's. And that's interesting because everybody says elderly people in France, outside of Paris, they don't speak English. She spoke English perfectly fine.
Yeah. Right.
So. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean it was not difficult to find him. It
No,
wasn't like he fell off the earth.
All.
Right.
Not at all.
Right. So, but all these people that were like, "Oh, he took the money and ran." No, he's right there.
Right. Yes, that's super interesting. Nobody took the 2 hours it took me to track him down. I was the only one.
Right.
Yeah. That is how we got the first English interview.
Yeah.
So
and how you got your rewards there? Your what's it Mega Drive?
Mega Drive. Yeah.
Or Sega Genesis for those of us in the real world.
Yeah, exactly.
What is making that noise? What is happening? Oh my
I'm not hearing noise. I'm not hearing noise here.
I keep every couple of seconds I hear like a little tap 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 tap.
It's not
something
in the recording.
Something bad. I mean, it's probably a mouse or something. And I've been sitting out here where I'm sitting here quietly enough where things forget I'm here. So like birds are flying in and then leaving and whatnot, and bugs keep landing on stuff. And so there's probably a mouse that's just like, oh, he's not gonna eat me. So they're having an acorn or something. It's about that time of year.
There's one more news that has nothing to do with gaming, and that is John Draper, aka Captain Crunch, released a new video on his YouTube channel called Crunch Time TV, and it's an interview with his friend Aaron Getting from Thailand.
Yeah. Thailand.
Okay, Thailand. You don't say that. No TH?
We don't
okay, I repeat it. So, there is a new video from John Draper, aka Captain Crunch, on his YouTube channel called Crunch Time TV with his friend Aaron Getting in Thailand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How is John Draper doing?
Since he found a new care home, he's doing pretty well. He never complained ever since.
That's great. He was having a rough time of it there for a while.
Oh yeah, the old place, they were not taking care of him well.
They were not.
I mean, John Draper, I've seen him twice.
Oh yeah. Twice. We know John Draper.
Twice in my life. He is a force of energy. It's amazing. Anybody else in his situation would have given up and committed suicide or whatever. But he is going strong. He is always complaining most of the time in his life about how life is unfair to him. But in the end, he is going strong. And I remember 6 years ago, I was actually watching a presentation about spam and how to fight back spam and so on. He has such a sharp mind in this internet tech industry. It's amazing. For all his faults, he has, his special personality and so on. From the technical side,
that's a nice way of saying it.
From the technical side, he is brilliant. So, seeing that he is in his early 80s already, once he is dead, it will be a big loss for
the
IT community, because he is brilliant.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. He's a little different, but
Yeah.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, he's super brilliant, and he has this super strong will to live.
Yeah.
I mean, even when he was still mobile and walking around and stuff, with the half of a steel cage in his body and stuff. Anybody else would have said like, okay, give me a wheelchair, I can't handle it anymore. He was still traveling to Germany and stuff and going by train and whatever and stuff.
You're not
He
mobile
was
anymore?
absolutely no.
Oh, okay.
So this energy is amazing. I mean he's still traveling around, but I guess more short distance. I mean, I got a call while he was at the bus and stuff, so he's still doing stuff when he can. But anyway, anybody else I know that was like, okay, leave me alone, but he still wants to achieve something. So he's amazing. But when I hit 70 plus, I hope I still have this strong will to do stuff and to live. And it's for me it's amazing. It's this contrast of always complaining, always complaining. But on the other hand, not giving up his life and still moving on. This whole combination is absolutely incredible. I always found this super amazing. I mean, he's also doing. I mean, he has been done crazy stuff like DNA DNA stuff. In Thailand, special therapy. And all that special treatment.
Yeah, stem cells or whatever.
Stem cells treatment in Thailand and stuff. Yeah. And we're like, where anybody else was like, I have to go to Thailand for that. Yeah, give me a break. I would rather not.
Yeah.
But he's like, why not? I'm not too old. I can still do it. That is what he always says. I'm not too old. I can still do it. So, it's super amazing. So this whole, it's just the contrasts in the personality, and on the other hand, while he is a special character, from the personal side and the technical field, he's absolutely brilliant. So it's an interesting combination of a person, and when he will be gone someday, we will feel it, because I don't know anybody else that has a similar character like him. And there are not many other brilliant minds from that era still around.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there will be new people, of course. There always will be, but yeah. Anyway, I just derailed a bit. Yeah.
We've been doing this for like an hour and a half now.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, we've been derailed. This entire intro has been derailed.
Isn't that why people love?
Yeah, maybe we should now go. Maybe we should now go and talk to Charles Cecil.
Exactly.
Unless we have more intro, but I think we're
no more.
We're introed out.
No, all good.
Okay.
Yeah. So today we have another guest, and actually today we complete our hat trick. 3 industry pioneers in a row. First we had John Romero, then we had Mark Cale from System 3, and today we have the very infamous Charles Cecil from Revolution Software. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course.
Yeah. Mark said when you talk to Charles, don't forget to ask him about his time at Activision. So.
Yes, no, Mark was one of our developers, and of course published Last Ninja.
Right.
And I think it was written by the wonderful Mev Dink, who then wrote the first Samurai as a sort of as a counter to the Last Ninja. But System 3, it's extraordinary. They've been writing. They wrote some great games back in the 80s, and they're still writing many games, and it's extraordinary.
But today we are not here to talk about Last Ninja, but about Broken Sword, which is actually called Cycle of Blood in America for some reason.
It's called Circle of Blood in America. It's called Baphomet's Fluch in Germany, and it's called Chevalier de Baphomet in French. And the reason,
right.
The reason for that is that, you know, when the game was released back in 1996, people in America didn't talk to people in Europe, and everybody got their news from magazines, and there was very little crossover. You know, obviously the opportunity to speak to you would be impossible like this. So it didn't really matter because everybody in Germany knew it by one name, and in America as another, and France in another. And it was only when we started publishing it on iPhone that it became clear that actually we needed some sort of global presence. But I have to say, we've decided to keep the separate names because the game is so well known in those particular languages. When we worked with Virgin, they really took the localization incredibly seriously. And one of the huge privileges of that is that many German people believe that Baphomet's Fluch is by a German developer, and many French think that Chevalier de Baphomet, with its title, you know, localized, is by a French developer. And it's really nice to sort of kind of try and stay neutral. I feel like a good European, and you know, and as such, you know, we've decided to stick with those localized names, but not Circle of Blood, because that was a ludicrous name. So that one we've got rid of completely. But more confusingly, the second Broken Sword 2, was actually called Broken Sword in America. It was all a mess.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what was actually your starting point and in the game industry, if I may ask? I mean, or general being in touch with computers. I mean, what sparked the interest?
Well, if we go back to 1979, at my school, one of the maths teacher had a computer, which I started playing with, learnt a little bit. But I then left school in 1980 and was sponsored by Ford as a mechanical engineer before going to university. And I met a fellow engineer, we became friends, called Richard Turner. And he just started a home computer games company in the city of Hull in the northeast of England. And one day we were you know, drinking in the pub, playing Space Invaders and Galaxians. And he said, "You enjoy telling stories. Why don't you write an adventure?" He said, I'll write the parser and the system. You write the adventure itself, and we'll see if we can sell it." So I did. And the first game was called Adventure B, Inca Curse. And I'm slightly ashamed to say that it was inspired absolutely and completely by the wonderful Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, even to the extent that at the end, I think that a great big rock starts rolling after you, and you have to get out within, I think, 4 turns. But even back in those days with that game, we put in a treasure system. So, and I thought you could carry a maximum. Well, you could carry a maximum number of inventory items. And I thought, oh gosh, if there are, I think it must be 3 or 4. If people are really clever, what they'll do is they'll drop all of these items and pick up the most valuable, work out what the most valuable treasure is. And we put on the packaging, you know, this is how much treasure you can take out. And fairly quickly, people started coming back and saying, well, we've got more treasure than that. And what I didn't realize is that what these people had discovered is you could work out where the rock was going to be triggered. You could drop a whole lot of treasure, return, leave, come back, grab more treasure. In other words, people were learning to subvert the game world. And they were thrilled that they could subvert it and it would respond and it would give an intelligent outcome to what they were trying to do. The game isn't very good. It isn't very well written. In particular, my spelling is absolutely terrible, shameful. but it was fun, and it was the beginning of an extraordinary ride. Right from really very much pioneering the whole industry, the good, the bad, the ugly, the ups, the downs. It's been extraordinary.
Interesting. Yeah. So you've always been the adventure guy.
Well, always, yeah, always back. And we wrote it for the Sinclair ZX81, which had 1K of memory. So my iPhone has 256 million times as much memory as we had. But I mean, two things that I like to say. The first one is that, we wrote a chess program in 1K, and it actually played quite a good game of chess. I mean, absolutely phenomenal programming. And the other thing is that you can look back now and say, oh, 1K is ridiculous. But back in 1981, that home computer, had the same memory and the same processing power as the multi-million-dollar computers that landed Apollo 11 on the moon. So it was incredibly exciting. That's why. So put yourself in the position of where we were in 1981, and it was extraordinary. Now, of course, it all looks a bit puny.
It's interesting that also that with Broken Sword compared to other games is actually, despite it has a comical look and is, well, obviously hand-drawn, I guess, it is an adult theme. I mean, how much point-and-click adventures do you know that start with a murder in a foreign country? So it's actually pretty interesting, because I remember I bought it actually in 1997 in a warehouse while I was at school, and so I remember that I was actually surprised when I played it. I thought, like, okay, it's an adventure like any other adventure at that time. I mean, at that time you had stuff like, Simon the Sorcerer was very famous here in Germany, for example, which is interesting because nobody that works in the industry nowadays, like you or Ron Gilbert, ever mentioned that series in their presentations ever again, which I never understood. But for some reason, Simon the Sorcerer didn't get so much love from the industry.
I don't know why.
For some reason. And
do you not think it might be that the puzzles made no sense whatsoever?
That could be. But I have to admit, I always cheated. I always had a long play from a magazine next to me, because otherwise I would end up in a frustration. I mean, I was a teenager back then. I would have probably thrown the CD out of the window if I didn't have that, And I mean, Broken Sword wasn't particularly easier, especially this famous goat puzzle that everybody is talking about. So
no, I know. Well, if I can take you back slightly,
sure.
The thing about when we started, founded Revolution in 1990, our competitors were, of course, Sierra and LucasArts, and Sierra wrote, of course, many fantastic games. But by God, King's Quest took itself seriously, way seriously, not an ounce of humor. And it was, King Graham of Daventry. Now, if you're English, Daventry is a town near Luton Airport. It is of no note whatsoever. And never in God's world would you ever have a king called Graham. None of it made any sense. So in many ways, our first game, Lure of the Temptress, was in response to this ludicrousness of King's Quest and taking itself seriously. And interestingly, Tim Schafer actually said that when LucasArts started, they had exactly the same view, that really it was all about creating some humor as a juxtaposition to what Sierra had been doing. And clearly what Lucas were doing was writing really fun games. But those games, my criticism, I mean, they're excellent games, and particularly Day of the Tentacle is one of the best adventures ever written, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But my criticism of Monkey Island in particular is that the puzzles really make very little sense. And I'm not going to sidestep the goat, but I am going to take a swipe at, for example, opening I think you're opening a bolt on a pump by working out that you needed to get a monkey and put it in your pocket, and it became a monkey wrench. So the point,
right.
my point being that you could never, and besides which, guys, we don't use the term monkey wrench in English. We use an adjustable spanner. So therefore, monkey wrench doubly means nothing. But what my criticism of Monkey Island, and much less so Day of the Tentacle, was that the puzzles were impossible. Many of the puzzles were impossible to work out. And so your reward was retrospective. And if you didn't have a long play, what you would inevitably do pretty quickly is use every object on every other object and combine them. And I felt that actually an adventure would be better if you could set up the characters with their motivations, come to understand their motivations, come to understand the state of the world, and that the puzzles would be logical within those contexts. And that's certainly what the objective. And of course, some of the puzzles, don't work so well. But broadly, I would hope that the reason that people still enjoy Broken Sword is that the puzzles are logical, and that as audience tastes have changed, in many ways, they are no longer prepared to be frustrated by adventure games. And we're just very, very lucky that we have a very loyal following and that people still want to play. And so I suppose I ought to get to the nub of your question, which involves a certain goat. And rather stupidly, I listened to and super served the fans that were saying that the games were too easy. And it was probably a tiny, tiny, tiny proportion, but they complained that the games were too easy. So what I did was I put in this difficult puzzle on the basis that it would keep them quiet. And it did, and they solved it fairly quickly. But to 95% of people who hadn't complained because actually the puzzles were about right, this was an absolute stinker. And it was really a very unfair puzzle because we changed the way the interface works halfway through the game, which is a cardinal sin in game design.
That's true.
I knew that we became, that we'd hit the reasonable knowledge of the wide public when a taxi driver who was driving me to Sony, and I asked him about, he when I told him it was Sony, he said, "Oh, is that PlayStation?" I went, yeah. He said, "Oh, what do you do?" I went, "Right, video games." "Oh," he said, "any that I would have heard of." And I kind of knew that they wouldn't. I knew he played Call of Duty. I just knew it. So I said, no, none that you'd have heard. "Oh, go on, give me a go. Give me a go." I said, "Okay, Broken Sword," I said. And he looked round and he said, "Are you the bastard that came up with a goat puzzle?" And I was really proud of that. And then when we did our Kickstarter for Broken Sword 5, a wonderful group of fans came up with something called the Order of the Goat, in recognition of the fact that this was a really bastard hard puzzle. And somebody created a Wikipedia for it. So it is a really, really unfair puzzle, but by God, everybody remembers it.
That's true. Actually interesting, yesterday I saw a discussion on Steam that the Gabriel Knight 3 puzzle with the cat fur to use as a mustache took the throne away of being the most hard and the hardest and the most unfair puzzle in an adventure game. So people actually, I've read articles saying that people actually say that Gabriel Knight 3, because of that cat fur mustache puzzle killed adventure games for a few years because people were so pissed off. So actually,
such a bad puzzle.
So actually, you can be happy that you weren't blamed for destroying a whole genre of games. Interesting that you mentioned Broken Sword 5 because I remember this is one question I wanted to ask. In an interview on your YouTube channel of Revolution, you actually mentioned that you will put a homage of Broken Sword 2.5, which is a fan project in the game. And I saw people on Steam actually discussing if you finally did that or if you never did that.
I didn't do that. And I've completely forgotten what I promised. I was very flattered by Broken Sword 2.5. An extraordinary team of fans and enthusiasts. It was extraordinary, and I really take my hat off to them.
So you didn't. Okay, now that question is at least resolved because people to this day they are still not sure. But not even. I mean, you are very humble saying you are flattered. Not even that. You actually supported the project by giving away the assets of the character for free.
Oh yes, yeah. But the thing is that they weren't selling it. This was a fan project.
Right.
So yes, we were delighted to give them the assets. Absolutely. I mean, we didn't support them financially, but no. We're very happy to give the assets away. And I tell you what, we gave our assets to Virgin when they were writing Toonstruck. And do you know the great thing about video game developers? Is that broadly we really like each other. There are some exceptions, but we really like each other. And let's talk about Dave Gilbert. If Wadjet writes an adventure game that does well, it doesn't mean that people are not going to buy our games. In fact, it means that people are more likely to buy our games.
Right.
And besides which, Dave's a great guy. But my point being that we have every reason to cooperate and to talk about things and become friends. And that's completely in contrast to film and television, where they really hate each other.
Right. I mean, I found this especially remarkable because you always read news about Nintendo stopping this project and that fan project and Disney cracking down on Star Wars fan projects and stuff. And so it's very refreshing to read that a person like yourself is like, yeah, sure, if you need something, here you go. And somehow they even convinced the original voice actors and the recording studios to work for free and support their voices in English and German for the fan project. So it's totally amazing for me.
What we did say, though, was that they couldn't ever imply that it came from Revolution directly. So there were constraints, but they were fairly obvious ones. And as I say, I'm delighted. And it was a really good game in the end. So it was fantastic. It was really worthwhile.
True. Well, I just wanted to mention it because I think it's special still. Even if you say you are friends with each other in the industry, big corporation might differ there. And perhaps let's talk a bit because it's just fairly recent. You finally released the Reforged edition of Broken Sword, and actually I was personally a Kickstarter as well, so I'm totally looking forward to the physical edition. I can't wait to have that. And there were a few questions, and also there was something that really I found amazing, and I saw that a week after release you had some developers swamping swamping the Steam forums, replying to people complaining about certain stuff and trying to fix bugs and improve the game in a new update. And it was like, I've never seen such a dedication from a small studio like that in a long time, honestly, you know, that developers would actually spend their time replying and saying like, hey, if you have a crash log, can you send it to my personal work address? Normally you wouldn't give out direct email addresses and stuff. So you were very, very supportive to your fans, and I found this very interesting.
That's our team. Our team is phenomenal. But the other thing I do need to say is that, you know, if we go back to Broken Sword 5 just for a second,
sure,
we would not have been able to write that game had we not had the support of our community. And I think people realize that, because adventure games are very, very expensive to write. You know, we're not the multi-million-dollar LucasArts or Sierra. And what the big change came through social media and the ability to actually meet fans directly. And it was such a thrill, because bear in mind that, you know, when I first started in 1981, we would meet, you know, fans of our games, which was just wonderful. And then retail became powerful, and then publishers became powerful. And so by the time Revolution started, we were 2 steps away. We were having games commissioned by publishers, and the publishers were selling to retailers, and then retailers were selling to gamers. So we had no idea what people really felt. And the big change happened with when we launched the game onto iPhone. And we had the opportunity through social media, through our relationship with Apple, to communicate directly and actually then organize events. And, you know, it's still a thrill to be able to, you know, meet people who are fans. And perhaps it means more to me because I went for so long having had a direct communication, losing it, and then getting it back again. And both I and our whole team are very passionate about that relationship.
Do you think that has kind of changed the dynamic in how games are received? Because back in the big publisher days, you know, before social media, you'd have a lot of like magazine reviews, and that could kind of make or break a game, what the reviewers thought of it. But now it's kind of like you can go straight to the audience, and it's not, you know, those magazines aren't that, you know, they aren't the impact, they don't have the impact that they used to have.
No, they don't. And I mean, they're still important, and then of course influencers are important as well. And you know, in Germany, the game was streamed by Gronk, which was fantastic. And other streamers, you know, around Europe and in the US. So in some ways, you know, the traditional press is important because it creates a bedrock of interest. But it needs to be done then in conjunction with influencers who, you know, have a huge effect on the audiences. They absolutely trust what these people have. I mean, clearly we've moved to a relation to a world in which the relationship between somebody giving information and the community receiving it is incredibly important for both sides.
Right.
Yeah. I also wonder, I mean, I don't know if you can talk about that, but there has been some criticism about the Refresh Edition, especially the audio quality of the voices. I mean, you said in other interviews you thrown the original recordings out, so you don't have them anymore in higher quality. But some people raised in the community that with modern AI tools, it should be possible to improve the audio quality further. Are you actually planning to dig into that at some point?
Yes. Yeah, we are. We put a lot of effort into, a lot of thought, a lot of work, and bearing in mind that we needed to do this 6 months ago, and we used what we believe to be the best tool. But also bear in mind that yes, you can use AI to get rid of all of the hiss and to make it feel and make it sound clear. But if you do that, then you lose the intonation and the subtlety of the actor's performance. So while some people would disagree with me, I felt very passionately that we should enhance it, but not to the extent of actually losing the subtlety of the actor's performance. So, of course, we've taken, a lot of knocks from people who say, oh, well, modern AI should be able to get rid of all of the hiss. Well, yes, it can. And yes, we could have done, but we chose not to. Certainly, as the technology progresses, we're very, very aware and sympathetic with the concerns about AI. But I do think that if you're not using anybody else's materials, which clearly we're not, then I think it's a legitimate use. And this is something that we will certainly keep an eye on and may well circle back at some point. But it was, in my view, the best solution at the time when we needed to do it. And yes, as I say, we could have improved the quality, but I wasn't prepared to then lose the intonations of the actors.
I see. So you said very briefly you are looking into options. So there could be a big update on the sound department at some point. Okay.
They could.
I mean, I saw some.
Sorry.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, no, but only when it would be a substantial enhancement.
Oh.
But yes, yeah, absolutely.
But it's nice to know that you are not totally, scrapping it off, saying no, it's done, we are done,
Oh no, we've got one of the big things I think is important is actually returning to games and bringing them back to life with enhancements, and that's something that we will continue to do for the foreseeable future.
I mean, I've read, I don't know how much of that is true anymore because it's a few years old article, but I've read an article that at some point in the lifetime of Revolution, you actually only had 8 employees because you struggled a bit with financials for a while. So I don't know. I always think people are too harsh in the Steam forums on the Reforged release, and I always think like, well, it's a small studio, be happy that they did it at least anyway, but people always have demands at some point, and obviously sometimes they don't see who is behind the project. They always think like, yeah, make it a DLC, and that's it. That's always the common answer. Make a DLC, then you get your money in return. And I'm like, well, it's Revolution. I don't know. So, what's your take on it?
I tell you what. Well, I mean, first of all, I when we read these negative comments, we like to think that they're because people really care. Seriously. and so, if people really care, then negativity can be turned into positivity very, very easily. And that's one of the reasons why we do take a lot of notice. I mean, there are some forums which we miss. But broadly, we try and cover the main ones. But I love the idea that you say that we go down to 8. We're about 8 now. We went down to 0.
Okay.
We worked with for Broken Sword 3. We worked with a publisher called THQ, who at the time were the biggest games publisher in the world.
Oh yeah, they were bought out by Nordic, THQ Nordic, yeah.
Well, only after they went bankrupt. So yeah,
exactly.
But
THQ
published the game, and we had no choice but to sign a deal, which ultimately led to them making about a $5 million profit on Broken Sword 3, and we made a £200,000 loss, which is very bad business by any stretch of the imagination. And frankly, the US side treated us very, very badly. And for Broken Sword 4, they pretty much screwed us. So effectively, they were making lots of money from these games, but we were bankrupt. Wow. So
I didn't know it was that bad.
No, we didn't go. We basically closed the company down, mothballed everything, At that time, I worked as a consultant because we had to pay off the overdraft, and so I worked on a British television the game adaptation called Doctor Who, which you may or may not have heard of, and then rather ironically also contributed to the video game of the Da Vinci Code, and. And the reason was because we had, we were effectively bankrupt. We never did go bankrupt. Revolution has never gone bankrupt, just to be clear. But we were really close, and we were, it seemed impossible. It also seemed very unfair because we were writing games that were really successful, and it doesn't matter if other people make more money. All we wanted to do was to be able to survive, and this company THQ were really making it impossible for us to survive. I mean, ironically, 4 or 5 years later, they were bankrupt. They went from being the biggest games company in the world to being bankrupt. And as they absolutely collapsed due to digital distribution, we of course were able to reinvent ourselves. And the defining moment in that was a call from a gentleman called Paul Burford at Apple. And he phoned, he got hold of my number and he phoned up and he said, "Oh, I work for Apple. We have a new device that's just launched called the iPhone." It's like, we were huge fans of Apple. So yeah, we've heard of the iPhone. Yes, yeah. He said, we think your games would work well on our platform. And we were so excited. And what they said was that they couldn't pay us any money. But they would support the game if we brought it with marketing. And at that point, we had two people who didn't work for Revolution, but had worked for Revolution. Tony Warriner, who was one of the founders, and a guy called Joost Peters. And Joost had come to us on some sort of work experience because he was a fan of Beneath a Steel Sky and Scum VM. I'm sure you know Scum VM, a group of enthusiasts, adventure enthusiasts, and Joost and two other programmers, students, had taken the source code for Beneath the Steel Sky and created the version for Scum VM. So anyway, Tony and Joost, we had no money whatsoever, but Tony and Joost worked really, really hard for virtually nothing, and I'm incredibly grateful to them both for that. And first, brought across Beneath the Steel Sky. And the reason that we did that first, one of the reasons was because the resolution was 320-200, which was about the resolution of the iPhone. And then when we produced Broken Sword, which was a generation later, that was 640-480, which was about the resolution of the next generation. And then when we produced Broken Sword 5, of course, that was Retina. So we produced very, very high res. So we were incredibly lucky that our games could port and feel contemporary. But, the idea that in whenever it was 2008-ish, that nearly 20 years later, the game, because when the games were sold at retail, they go into retail, if you were lucky, they would last for 6 months. Then you'd get a budget version. If you were lucky, and then it was gone. Right. So that's why I threw so many of the digital assets away, because I knew that we would never need them. Why keep them? Why keep them clogging up one of my rooms? I might as well just throw them away.
You're actually right. The version I got was the white label budget version, right? Yeah. From 1997, so 1 year later. Actually, you got this right. Yeah, it was still a big box though. So.
But did it have exciting things inside it?
Besides, it is a CD and manual, not at all. No.
Did it have a printed manual?
Yes.
Oh right. Well, that's okay. It didn't have. It didn't have Savage Warriors in it.
Nope. Nope.
Ah.
I still have it, but it didn't have anything of that. Well, the white label budget editions weren't very. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly the edition. That's exactly what I got. Yeah, that's exactly the one. You came prepared. I'm amazed. I'm very happy that you are open, so open to the questions, because I was like, if I'm talking to Charles Cecil, we have to talk about a few things that you never spoke about or answered before, because when you else get the opportunity, right?
Yeah, well, I'll answer as much as I can. I mean, that's the other thing that we do for our community. They ask us questions, and we try to give them as honest an answer as we can. I mean, sometimes we don't know the answer, of course, but
right.
we do try. We do try to be absolutely as straight as possible.
Here's one thing I also wanted to ask you. You mentioned Tony, and I know that he also worked on the Game Boy Advance edition.
Yes.
Which is actually super funny, because I got my Game Boy Advance edition for Broken Sword cheaper, because the seller thought that the game cartridge was actually wrong and not fitting to the packaging. But what the seller didn't know, for cost reduction, I learned, you actually put in the same cartridge all around the globe. So it said Broken Sword on the cartridge, but on the packaging and the manual it said Baphomets Fluch in Germany. And you could change the language the first time you start the game. You could select the language. So it was actually cost reduction. All units, even the localized ones from other countries, had the same English label on the cartridge. And actually the seller I saw on eBay thought it was a mistake and gave me a discount.
Oh, you did well. You did well.
So sometimes people don't know what they're actually selling, But it was actually a clever move to do a cost reduction there by just making the same game and just let people select the language from the beginning, instead of making thousands of different.
Yeah,
well,
I mean, that's because the Nintendo take full responsibility for all the manufacturing, and they almost certainly wouldn't, because you would have thought that they could have produced 10,000, whatever it was, 10,000 cartridges, and then they would have allowed them to put whatever label they want. But I think that they insist that they put the label and everything on.
Right.
which is actually interesting. I mean, it's a nice touch. I also saw in the same interview, he also mentioned that the Broken Sword 2 was 2 weeks before completion for the Game Boy Advance, but you never released that stuff because Beam Software, the publisher, went bankrupt beforehand. So you never got paid for that, he said. And I wonder, and I wanted to ask you for that, why don't you give the the code as sources to projects like Games That Weren't, that actually have people that would complete games like that for free and give it out to the community? Or another alternative, make a second Kickstarter. Because he said he wouldn't get the time until he retires to ever complete the game and go into the source code and getting a development kit for the Game Boy Advanced. But there are people in the community who have the resources for that. So just wonder what's the decision behind it.
Yeah, Tony, we're talking about Tony now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Tony's great, and he's really well connected with the retro scene. So we need to work something, and that would be a really nice idea. It would be really fun to finish it, wouldn't it? I mean, obviously it comes with its own problems because it won't be tested. What happened with the first one is that, rightly or wrongly, we actually re-implemented everything from scratch, because you'll remember it was a direct control. We also needed to squeeze it onto a tiny cartridge. And so when it came out, and then we used that as the basis, probably wrongly, for the iPhone version.
For the director's cut, yeah, I read that too. Yeah.
Yeah, and people complained that we had cut elements out, which was not true. It wasn't that we cut elements out. It was that we hadn't implemented them because of the memory constraint. And then when we did the DS and Wii version, and then the iPhone version for director's cut, we used that version. And I think by that stage we'd forgotten that we hadn't implemented stuff and then forgot to implement it. So there were a lot of people complaining that we cut stuff out, but that wasn't the case at all. It was that we hadn't implemented it in the first place.
I mean, he said in the same interview that he danced it down to 8 meg, and there were only 3 bytes left when you were finished with making the game. So it's incredible big feat to have it on the Game Boy Advanced.
Yeah, well, Tony, C. Vince, David Sykes take all the credit. I take no credit for that whatsoever.
Yeah, but it's interesting. I just wanted to know if you are open to make it available for archival purposes, preserve history, because that's our thing at Scene World, and that's also why we do these interviews, to preserve history in a way. And I just thought I would ask if you were open to either make it a new Kickstarter and commercially finish it, or giving it for free to the community, because I mean it's sad to hear that the game is playable despite it still has bugs, so it should be out there. Just my opinion.
Yeah, well, all I can say is that I'd completely forgotten about it until Tony mentioned it. So it's something I really get on with Tony. He's terrific. So we need to get together, have a glass of wine, and plan where we move forward.
Give credit to us for mentioning it if you do.
I will do.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I mean, this totally went already better than I envisioned. I was a bit unsure how you would react to not sugarcoating, everything, because that's what some people do. They get starstruck and then things turn out sugarcoated. Yeah. Anyway. I actually learned from my friends from Latin America that Broken Sword as a product even went to countries like Colombia and stuff, and I was like super impressed to see how much your game, seeing that it's from the 90s, actually spread around the globe.
Well, the thing is that, and also in Eastern Europe, which of course in the 90s was very different to Eastern Europe now. So all of them were pirated. And you know what? They were never going to buy it in the first place. And now we have wonderful fans in South America and Eastern Europe because it was pirated the first time round. And, we put the game onto GOG and we accept that if somebody wants to pirate it, it's not a very difficult thing to do, but hopefully people will want to buy it if they think that it's worthwhile, because it means that we will then continue writing more adventure games. So yeah, no, certainly. I mean, with Beneath the Steel Sky, we actually released that for free, and the Temptress, because our opinion was that because they were DOS games, it would have been impossible to play them from Windows 98 onwards because DOS was no longer supported. And it was only because of the fine people at ScumVM that we could release them at all. But certainly for Broken Sword, which we continued to charge. But we came to rely in many ways on ScumVM for that as well. I've completely forgotten what the question is, but hopefully the answer vaguely covers it.
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
in a quick aside too, because Jörg was talking about them going, to Colombia and whatever, and there was a lot of localization in these games, and so I'm just curious, what was the process of doing that like back in when you were doing it? And Jörg mentioned a thing about which I didn't know about, which was in Star Trek Judgment Rights, DeForest Kelley laughing in mid-sentence. And I didn't know. Did the original actors do the different languages?
Yes, no. He did no. They only released an English version. The talkie version was never localized. But I mentioned it in the list of questions because I was like, DeForest Kelley died afterwards. That was the last Star Trek thing he ever did. Was the Judgment Right talkie version? And my question was, why people that did manage the recording didn't ask the actors to just repeat the recording? And even the German version of Broken Sword has a piece in it where the speech talks over each other and then mid-sentence stops. And I wondered, is that a quality control issue or why?
Yes, it is. When we record, we'll normally get two or three takes. But may I tell you about the recording, the first recording we did for our game Beneath the Steel Sky, where this, we weren't the first game. We were one of the first games to actually record voices, and it was only done in English. And I had absolutely no idea what to do. But my sister's best friend from school, her boyfriend worked for the Royal Shakespeare Company. And he said, I can organize it. I've got a friend who's got a studio. And I'll just get a bunch of really talented actors and we'll do a great job. That's fantastic. So anyway, the big day arrived and I turned up. And his mate's studio was actually his front living room on Balham High Street. And the buses went past every few minutes and everything kind of shook.
Okay.
And he said, don't worry, the microphones are really good. They won't pick it up. I went, really?
So no sound chamber as you know it today. Okay.
So then we kind of, because I hadn't prepared, the actors would say, what should we do? I know, I'll do a Birmingham accent, we'll say this, is that all right? And I've got no idea. So we had no director. And then this particular guy, whose name I won't mention, said to the actors, 1 o'clock, he said, come on then, lads, who's coming off to the pub? And I said, you're not going to drink too much, are you? Oh, no. 2 hours later, they come back absolutely as drunk as skunks. And they walk in and they're trying to hide the smell of, and we're about to go start again. And this guy says, hang on. Who wants to head upstairs for a spliff? And they go, oh, yes. So they all go upstairs and start smoking marijuana. So they're drunk and stoned, which means that, first of all, they have no idea. All they can do is giggle when they rant. They sound nothing like they did in the morning. It was an absolute catastrophe.
Wow.
That might explain why some of the, and I don't know, I'm sure that's not typical, but certainly the professionalism, there was no professionalism in the early days.
Okay. Okay.
And then it became very professional.
Although
they started improvising. That's fantastic.
Okay, that explains it. Because I have came across so many games like that, like why didn't they just re-record it? And now we know.
Yeah, that's why.
Wow. Yeah.
And also you can ask an actor, and you keep asking them, and eventually when I did a game, I designed a game based on Charles Dickens's Christmas Carol. And to help the developer out, which was Sumo Digital in Sheffield, I recorded the narrator's voice. And then it came time to finish off, and the American office said, "We love your narrator." And I said, "Look, I'm not a professional actor. I just. Oh no, we love you. It's got to be you. It's got to be your voice." And obviously, I was thrilled to do it. But so I then turned up at the studio, and it was really hard work because after 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever, you know exactly how you want to say something, but your voice just doesn't come out the way that you want. And it was a very interesting, and the end result was fine, but it was a very interesting exercise for me because clearly on one side of the microphone, it's very easy to get frustrated when actors don't deliver in the way that you want and you expect. But you know, when they're tired, it's really hard work. I can tell you from first-hand experience.
Given that those voice actors are still around, you never came across the idea to re-record that one sentence for the Reforged edition, or were you like, that's an inconsistency we don't want, or would it be too much to ask for?
I'll tell you what, Jorg. How about this? If somebody can tell us where those inconsistencies are, then we will look for an opportunity to correct them.
Now I gave you an idea during this interview.
The problem, of course, is that our Nico in German, Francesca, passed away, which was very, very sad. So, you know, clearly we're not going to get...
But you exchanged her from the second installment on, and she sounds pretty similar, if I'm not mistaken.
Good. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. I would think though that the any errors or little bits that are in there probably because everyone's probably heard it 1,000 times because they've played the game before, and now it's like if they're playing like the remastered or whatever. If I didn't hear that little goof up that I'm so used to hearing, that would bother me as a player.
But that is why in such games you can often switch between original recordings and remastered recordings, or regional graphics, remastered graphics.
Yeah, so. No, you're absolutely right, and we actually put quite a lot of work into trying to correct some where it was possible to do so. So. You know, I think it was in German when it's 13, 14, and the first 13 doesn't work. And we actually we spliced it in from elsewhere. So, you know, quite a lot of work was put into trying to correct some of the things, but obviously we missed some, or some were impossible.
Awesome. So it's good to know that some of the money you made with the Kickstarter, and also obviously you have now your GOG and Steam sales, and soon the Switch version should be out as well, right? So it's good to know that you say a portion of that revenue will be put into releasing further updates on the game, because that's interesting. That's what is also something people expect. They expect constant updates to games, even to games who couldn't get updates. Like, well, it's a Mega Drive game. How much times you want to update it? You know, it's weird at some point, because you have people in their 20s or something. They don't understand how retro games work. At some point, you are just done with it. You know.
Yeah, that's the thing. You are. I mean, the interesting thing is that we've recently licensed. Probably not allowed to say, but we've licensed, you know, the original Broken Sword 1 and 2 to a retro platform, and of course that is what was released in 1996 and 1997. You know, it couldn't change. It never did change for exactly the reasons that you said. It was burnt onto a CD. That was it.
Right.
Are there challenges with because again with those original games, you know, especially for like consoles and stuff, like you know what the hardware you're making it for is, and now it's like everyone's got different stuff. So is there more of a challenge in making like a completed game that'll work on everybody's machine?
We still encounter problems with configurations, but it's nothing like it was a nightmare like 10, 15, 20 years ago. And there's so much homogeny now in terms of in terms of basic standards that are followed. It was horrible for such a long time, and it now generally, and we're talking about PC specifically, because obviously it works on a Mac, it works generally. Although that's not, we have got some very specific bugs that relate to M1 and different configurations. But broadly, you know, we do test, of course, across as many formats as we can, and we also use testing houses that do the same thing. But it was impossible. It was almost impossible 20 years ago because there were so many permutations.
Yeah.
Also, speaking about the contents of the games, you mentioned in a couple of interviews that you are very interested in myths and history, and that is why Broken Sword has a lot of them. You know, Maya and Templars and other historical things. How much of that is true and how much of that is fiction you put in the game?
Everything that we state as a fact, I believe to be as true as it can be. Obviously our big competitor is the Da Vinci Code, written by Dan Brown, which came almost 10 years after Broken Sword. And our fans are absolutely convinced that he must have played Broken Sword and stolen all our ideas. I'm before the lawyers send me, I'm not saying that. I'm saying our fans are saying that.
Okay, okay, noted.
And it came from a book called The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, that was written in the 1970s and is utter nonsense. It's by 3 English blokes that were completely duped by a Belgian, a nasty little anti-Semite called Pierre Plantard, who claimed that he was the Grand Master of the Priory of Sion. And they came across these, secret dossiers, which presumably had been hidden in the French, in the Parisian Bibliothèque Nationale by this guy. And I don't think in his wildest dreams, Pierre Plantard could have believed that, this silly little fraud that he'd pulled could have exploded and become so popular. And, still to this day, there are many people that believe about the Priory of Sion and that, Jesus had children. Jesus might well have had children. It's quite possible. But I promise you that they're not guarded by a group called the Priory of Sion that are a sister organization to the Knights Templar. And so when I read The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, it was clearly nonsense. When Dan Brown read The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail and used it as the basis for the Da Vinci Code, he clearly believed it. And I do wonder how much Dan Brown did his research over the internet, because I will go to these locations and get really excited to look for the subtleties and talk to the people who are passionate about those areas. And I will try to bring the authenticity. So, I hope that our fans know the difference between what we are saying is factually correct and what is fiction. And I don't know if you saw, as a Kickstarter backer, the manual that we provided. I don't know if you've looked at it, but what I was very keen to do was to provide a guide to locations that actually exist in Paris and around the world that relate to Broken Sword. And it's hugely flattering that a lot of people will ask us where they should go to, and they will go to the catacombs in Paris, and they will see the Kingdom of Death. It's incredibly flattering that people care enough and that they want to research, and they could and will again be able to climb to the top of Notre Dame, and they will see the view, the opening view across Paris, which is featured in the game, or they'll go to the catacombs and the Royaume du Mort, and they'll see the skulls, and they'll see a lot of the locations, and they'll see that actually the game locations were in many cases based on real locations, and hopefully the authenticity of the game will come across.
Which actually leads me to 2 questions. Let me first start with the first one. What was the thinking behind starting the Broken Sword game with a bang? I mean, murdering somebody, then having a bomb exploding in a cafe. I mean, that's something you couldn't do nowadays, I guess, because people would be very, very uneasy, with the violence in the world going on right now. but back in the 90s, I guess it was a different time. So what was your thought behind it? And on top of that, it's a comic style. So you would think it's more not for adults, but more for childs and stuff, you know? First impression.
Well, what we've always said is that we want games, we're not afraid of violence, but we want it to be in the UK we have PG, parental guidance. So
Right.
Raiders of the Lost Ark. You know, in Raiders of the Lost Ark, you get explosions, you get people being killed. I think video games are actually treated harsher than films, but we're not afraid of Spielberg, George Lucas violence. But the reason that it starts with an explosion is that whereas in a linear medium like film, you will have something called the inciting incident, and that's the incident that reverses, or turns the life of the protagonist on its head, and that can happen in a film up to a third of the way through. So you can be watching a film and you don't know why the protagonist is motivated to do what they're doing, and then you discover, and then it's resolved at the end. And to do that, the scriptwriter and the filmmakers need to build an empathetic relationship between the audience and the protagonist being the hero. In a game, it's quite different. Because you're expected to work, what then happens is that you need to create the empathetic relationship right from the very beginning, and you need to provide the inciting incident right at the very beginning. And it needs to start with a bang, you know, either metaphorically or literally, so that when you start that game, after 1.5 minutes of intro, you care enough about that character, you empathize with that character, and you know why they're doing what they do, so that right from the very beginning, we're making the player work. Because if you don't have that empathy, and if you haven't set the game up and motivated them, then why would they be interested? So
Right.
That's why it starts with a bang. It's a metaphorical and a literal bang.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, how much actually can you tell about the 6th installment? I mean, I saw the trailer and I know it actually starts at the same cafe as the 1st installment, but can you actually tell us a bit about it? That isn't a secret?
Well, I won't tell you too much, but what I will say is that it was being very nicely funded, and we had very, very good times 5 years ago, and then it got very tough, and so it's moving forward slowly, but pretty slowly, and we're a small team, as I told you, and we've really been focusing on Reforged. So I think it would be a little bit unfair, but what I do love is, and I've talked about this publicly, is a historical group called the Cathars, who were destroyed in a crusade in the 13th century, where millions of people were killed, and it was so brutal and so unfair. And on one hand, you had the Pope and the King of France, and on the other, you had a gentle, innocent group of people who believed in first of all, in equality, in that there were as many female priests. They believed in humanity. They believed in the spark of God, and that it really was irrelevant whether that spark came into a man or a woman. And so many of the ideas of the Cathars and the Gnostics, which was the sect from which they derived, so many of those ideas feel so prevalent and appropriate for the 21st century and the 2020s. So it felt exciting to me to tell an extraordinary historical story, which is also a metaphor for today.
Now let me ask you, in the trailer it also mentions that the graphic style is not the final one, and as we know, Ron Gilbert got a bit attacked for the graphic style of the latest Monkey Island installment. So much, though, that he disabled comments on his blog, so people cannot comment on it anymore. What will you do about it? Because I saw the trailer has kind of a mix between cartoonish but pseudo fake 3D. What is actually?
I would support the fake 3D in terms of the backgrounds. I think that what we did is we used the same artist, Tori Davis, worked with her, but instead of drawing flat planes, we drew planes at angles. So any single one will look exactly the same. But then as the camera moves, so the planes move in a 3D environment. I've only heard good things about that. What we hadn't worked on was the way that the characters were rendered. And I was very aware that this was very early prototype, and we felt that it was, we wanted to announce the game. We wanted to announce both Broken Sword 6 and Broken Sword 1 Reforged. And I was very, very wary about releasing it with characters that were rendered so crudely. So I completely accept the criticism, but I think that it's mainly criticism of the characters rather than criticism of the backgrounds.
I didn't hear a criticism about your graphic style. I just wonder what your feeling is as a creator when you notice what happened to Ron Gilbert. The big Ron Gilbert and his choice for his graphic artist, and people hated the style.
When they redid when Monkey Island, the first Monkey Island was redone, completely changed the art style. And I could see exactly what happened. You have an art director who in their own right is a very good artist saying, we need to bring it up to date. We need to bring it up to date. And as the game director, you had to be very wary of people making statements like that, because people have in their mind what they want, and you kind of need to respect that and deliver what they want, but really exceed it rather than changing it. So certainly for Broken Sword Reforged, we very much took we used the original graphics as the base. Now, there's a lot of work that goes, needs. So, characters will have little pixels that might represent, in the case of Albert, keys or the lapels. And so there's an enormous amount of interpretation, and we have, wonderful, enthusiastic graphic artists. But what they did is they went back to the original character sheets that were done, which were higher resolution, and interpreted it. And what I'm really thrilled about is that actually people generally are really pleased with the way that we approach the graphics. For the backgrounds, where we had backgrounds, we went back to the original line art. We used the game as a base, but then we redrew it. And some people have got very upset because in the museum there was a difference between the game art and the original line art. In the original line art, there is a sphinx, and what the artist did at the time is, to save time, is he took a scan of a photograph of a Buddhist goddess. And put that in instead. But that wasn't what the intention was. That wasn't what we intended. That was just a shortcut. So we reversed out of that and repainted based on the original. And some people don't like it. But that was a decision that we made, rightly or wrongly. I think most people do like it. And of course, what you can do is just press and toggle into the old if you want.
Right.
But there are always going to be disagreements. But broadly, I think we've done what we said we were going to do.
You reminded me of something. Why can't you switch in the cutscenes between the graphic styles? That's something a lot of people mentioned and said it should be possible to also see the old cutscenes.
The reason for that is that technically it was harder. It was a lot harder to do. And for example, the end Templar cutscene at the end, in the original, it was a movie. Sorry, in the original, it was played by sprites. So it was done by the game engine. But we decided that for Reforged, because I felt that the scene was very weak in the original, that actually we would benefit from the fact that it could be a movie. Probably one of the reasons that we decided to do it as being game driven is because of memory constraints, which obviously don't exist these days. So in that particular case, it would have been impossible because on one hand, it was game driven, but now it's a cutscene movie. So there wasn't the simplicity of just being able to change between one and the other as well. It wasn't simple, but it was possible to do. Whereas for cutscenes, it wasn't necessarily possible at all.
Right. And how about offering the director's cut additional content like the times to play with Nico in the Reforged edition, perhaps as a DLC or something, or as an option? A lot of people actually missed that. I mean, not me personally, because I just started playing the DLC. The DLC isn't dear to my heart, but some people who actually came from the, as I said, smart devices market, they actually missed that.
Yeah, and I would love to do that. That would be a big job, and I would love to do it, but I cannot hand on heart say this is something that is on our current roadmap, but I would love it to be.
I see. You are going away from this interview with a lot of ideas and tasks, I guess.
No, that one is one that's the one that I'm has very much inspired me. Of course, is the GBA version of Broken Sword 2, which I have been talking to Tony about. But you give me some really nice ideas. Putting the director's cut elements in is something that I would love to do, and it's definitely on the list.
Now you mentioned in a brief words at the mid of the interview that you probably will re-release the Broken Sword, if I didn't misunderstand you, in a future version after the Reforged. I wonder, is there actually a possibility? I mean, because some people say like, yeah, he will do it like George Lucas and re-release the Broken Sword over and over again for new resolutions, new systems, whatever comes across the next 20 years.
So I'm sorry, what is the question?
I mean, are you actually thinking about perhaps, re-releasing the game again? I mean, I guess the Reforged is probably now the third installment of Broken Sword 1.
Yeah, I think we thought very carefully, and obviously, to me, the fact that there was so much enhanced content meant that it was very legitimately a new game. If when we add new content, broadly we will put it as free DLC. I can't imagine us re-releasing it again because it's in 4K now, and like. Why would we do it? I don't know.
Some people say there are black frames on white screens.
Oh.
We've substantially enhanced games that we've written in the past, and we believe that it's a service to be loyal to fans who have bought the game. I mean, some people are very proud to say that they bought the game 7 times now across different formats, and that's terrific. And I mean, and nobody actually complains about it.
I only bought 3. Now I feel so little.
Get on that.
Well, I mean, the number of formats that it's appeared, but no, I don't see. I can't imagine re-releasing it again. I can't really imagine it. But then again, you can never say never.
But then people also said they want a reforged edition of the second, third, and fourth and fifth. I guess the 3D was the third and the fourth one. They want a reforged edition of the second, the third, and the fourth. Is that actually something you consider? I mean, would you do that?
Well, aren't we incredibly lucky that people care enough to ask? So the answer, of course, is it's something we're considering and looking into, of course, because the level of passion that we've had, even on the Steam forums, has been phenomenal. And it just makes us really, really enthusiastic. And, you know, both to consider bringing games. I mean, of course, the fourth one is probably the weakest. And I mean, ultimately, I would love to be able to go back to that at some point and, you know, redeem myself. The problem with the fourth one was that it was the second game that we worked on THQ, and they starved us of budget. They starved us of everything. And in the end, it was not the game that I wanted. And I would love to be able to come back after all these years and actually address it again at some point. That would be wonderful. But this is all pipe dream stuff. Well, it's not pipe dream. It could happen. But yeah, it is something. Given the success of Broken Sword Reforged, which is, you know, beyond what we had expected, and you know, we're really thrilled by how popular it is. That has got us really thinking about, you know, what else we can do, how we can move forwards with strength into the future.
It's somehow sad to hear that THQ had so much influence in the fourth and third installment, and actually didn't pay you well and stuff. And somehow sad, because the Broken Sword material is so good. You know, the base, the foundation is so much there. It's somehow sad. I mean, when the German press was actually readdressing the Reforged series, they actually nicknamed Broken Sword 3 as box pushing.
Yeah, I know.
And the fourth installment as rushed, and they rushed to finish it quickly.
Do you know, I can't, you know the expression, you take it on the chin. I can only take it on the chin. The box pushing was ludicrous. It was naive. I think that to begin with, it was terrific. But what happened somehow is the team, and it's my fault, it's not theirs, but, you know, got into this idea that, well, let's increase the difficulty. Let's, you know, that we have a repeated gameplay mechanic. We can make the game more challenging. And, you know, to an extent that would be fine, except that those box puzzles happened at points in the game where the story dictated that you wanted to move fast. So, for example, there's a burning building and you want to get into the burning building and you're rushing because the building has a light, and you've got a box puzzle like that. That was such a bad place. So I think that actually Broken Sword 3 is I think pretty good, and a lot of people say that it's their favorite Broken Sword game. I think with a few tweaks that could feel really, really good. The other thing about Broken Sword 3 is, I mean, I'll give you an example. When we were writing Broken Sword 4, we were kind of being starved of funds, and the PlayStation 3 was coming out. And so we went to THQ and we said, we could do a PlayStation 3 version really quite cheaply. Do you want it? They went, no. Okay. And then they came to us a month later and said, can you do this game on PlayStation 3 in 2 months? And we said, no, we can't. We could have done if you'd accepted it before, we could have done, but now it'll take us, 3 months from now. Okay, we don't want it then. So And this was we worked with a lot of very, very good people at THQ in the UK. So my scorn is saved for the THQ people in the US, and the people that they subsequently installed, because they had the power. They had complete power, and they made, in my opinion, some pretty bad decisions.
Now let me ask you, if they made so much bad decisions, why did you return to work with them for the fourth installment again, if the third one was already such a bad experience?
Well, the third one wasn't a bad experience.
Okay.
The third one, we worked with a really good team. We lost money because the deal had been so bad. It was the fourth one that was a bad experience, because what they did in the US is that they sacked all the people that we'd worked with and had agreements with, and installed their own people, and that was the problem.
Wow. So that is the point where you said, okay, we are going Kickstarter now, we're doing it on our own again.
No, that was the point at which we said, we have a huge, great overdraft and we are effectively bankrupt. We're going to mothball the company. What then happened was, when we got the call from Apple and we were successful, and Broken Sword 1, for example, we were selling on the App Store for $5, £5, £5, and we were asked to be part of something called the 12 Days of Christmas, which we gave the game away, which kind of worried me, because I thought anybody who wanted to play the game would get it for free, and that would kill all our sales. There were 2.5 million downloads in the day that it was available on sale. But interestingly, when we put it back up to full price again, our sales rocketed, and the sales of Broken Sword 2, which you just released, rocketed as well. And that's because the game got so much coverage on Twitter, as it was then. Broken Sword became one of the top 10 most tweeted keywords in the world. It was absolutely extraordinary. And what we were really excited about was that Apple were really excited. It was really good for their brand. We were just an almost bankrupt little studio in the north of England, working with what was soon to become the biggest company in the world. And there was incredible mutual respect, which is what we didn't get from the US side of THQ. And it was really nice to feel this is the way we used to, this is the way it should work. We should really enjoy working with each other.
It's and by the way, just checked it the other day. The games are still up on the App Store for a nice bundle price, so you can still get those games.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe Reforged will come to to iOS. Who knows?
Which is actually nice, because I remember I bought so many games between 2008 and 10, and at some point they stopped being updated and I can't play them anymore. So it's good to see that there are still companies who update their games 14 years later,
Well, I mean, with iOS and Android, you have to, because unlike, you were talking earlier, but obviously when a game releases on a console, it is locked in time, and but at the same time, it will then stop selling when you go onto the new generation. Whereas with mobile, of course, you get new operating systems, updates, and you do need to keep supporting them, which we have sometimes found it quite difficult because of the resource needed to keep those up to date and develop new games at the same time when you're a very small team.
For example, when they killed 32 bits, I believe, right?
Yeah.
That is the point where a lot of games stopped. That's the point where a lot of iPhone games just stopped working.
No, that was Mac games.
Except a few big ones like Tetris, Sonic. Those big ones, they are still updated.
That was Mac. That wasn't iOS. I don't know what the iOS thing was, but Mac on 10.15 they stopped supporting the 32-bit apps.
Must have been around that on the iPhone as well, because I remember I got a message like, ask the publisher to update the app for 64-bit.
Oh.
And then I had ended up uninstalling all those games that didn't work anymore. All those Double Dragons, Pole Position, all those games, all gone. Only the big ones are left, which is like Pac-Man, Sonic, Tetris. You know, those big names. So nice to know. But hey, I got the director's cut on Steam, so I don't need it on my iPhone.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I'm very happy that you are so open about everything, because I was like,
it's a pleasure. It's been lovely speaking to you.
Yeah. You don't prefer being asked the same questions over and over again?
No, not at all. And it's also fun to reminisce, because I've been, working and writing games for 40 years now. So it's lovely to kind of celebrate how extraordinary the industry is, and hopefully some of my memories and anecdotes will be fun and interesting for people. I hope.
Quite interesting, yeah. So what is your next plan? Will you just release the 6th installment and then the 7th and so on? Will you do this till you are old and gray, or what is your plan actually?
It's a little bit of grey hair here, I'm very, very lucky. I'm very, very lucky in that I've never made enough money to retire. So I have no choice but to keep working, which I would always want to do anyway. So I don't have the opportunity to retire, which is fantastic. So the answer to your question is, I will keep writing adventure games, both new games and, considering which ones we can bring back, whether it be like Beyond a Steel Sky, based on Beneath a Steel Sky, whether it be Broken Sword 6, Broken Sword 7, whether it be Broken Sword 2 Reforged. We are in a wonderful position because we have all of these choices. So yeah, I'm afraid the idea of retirement is not on the books at all. No interest whatsoever.
I wonder, did you ever regret going the 3D route after all?
Because we had no choice. We had no choice.
We had no choice. That was the market. Okay.
That was the market. And the publishers, said, this is what we want. And THQ said, this is what we want. And yeah, no, we and I'm not blaming THQ, because as I say, when we worked on Broken Sword 3, we worked with some terrific people at THQ and really enjoyed it.
I'm just asking
it was the market dictating.
I'm just asking because if I remember back the 90s and early 2000s when those 3D came, I guess it was 1999 and 2000 till 2003 till 2002, where adventure games were 3D. And I don't remember so much successful 3D adventure games. I mean, everybody is saying like Simon Sorcerer 3D was the weakest one. The Monkey Island installments in 3D were the weakest ones. Everybody is saying those 3D installments were the weakest ones, except Grim Fandango, I think it's called.
Grim Fandango.
Fandango, yep. Right? Thank you. That was one of the few very successful games from Tim Schafer, I believe.
I really feel like that's more of a situation where you had something that people knew of that had a specific art, like Monkey Island. Okay, mentioned that one. It had a very specific art style through most of the games, and then when they flipped out to 3D, the gameplay is still good. It's still a good game, but it's a departure from what people are used to with it, and so that's why it gets most of the criticism. It's just that it's not what people are used to seeing with it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Grim Fandango was based art style wise around 3D. It was defined by the 3D. It wasn't pretending to be 2D.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I forgot Discworld, by the way. They also made the switch to 3D. Yeah.
You also forgot Gabriel Knight.
Yeah.
That's true. Yes. Oh man, just 2 days ago I tried to get it run on Windows 11. That was a pain, but I got it in the end. You know,
the problem for poor old the poor developer is that they wrote that game in the very early when 3D was really in its infancy, and the whole point about adventure games is it's about characterization. It's about the expressions, the changing expressions, and to go that early was, clearly didn't work at all visually. I hope that nobody objects to me saying that, but really, I think as far as I remember, it was Gabriel Knight 3 that was the first 3D game, and kind of offered a warning to all of us that 3D just wasn't ready yet.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there are a few exceptions where they did 3D even earlier, like now I forgot it. What was that horror game again?
Phantasmagoria.
No. The other one.
Did that use 3D?
The other one, Alone in the Dark.
Oh yes.
Yeah, that was from 93, if I remember correctly, or 92 even. That was also 3D. Alone in the Dark. Yeah.
But that was a horror game rather than an adventure game. That's
true.
Of course the big difference.
Yeah.
And so what they could do is they could use the fact that we all remember the dog jumping through the window, coming crashing through the window and attacking us. It was brilliant. But actually, that was defined by the 3D look again. That felt very fresh because 3D. It was one of the first 3D games. Very French. Right. I mean that as a compliment. It felt very innovative.
Right. It's good to see that you actually are a player of so much adventure games or horror games in this case yourself, so you actually know what you're talking about. I mean, I saw your presentations you did a couple of them where you actually showed like the history of adventure games. I was like, wow, this man knows what he's talking about, because normally when you watch presentations from other people, for example, Ron Gilbert or David Crane, they always see the viewpoint from their own games. But you actually started the presentations like, hey, there are a couple of types of games, like those games, and then at the slide 4 and 5, you slowly address your games. And I always found this broad view of your presentations.
Oh, well, that's nice. Thank you. I mean, one of the things at the last Adventure X, actually, Tony and I were there, and somebody talked about adventure interfaces, and they said, and this is and the common one that we use today is the broken sword point and click. And we didn't realize that actually, it was defined. But one of the things that we felt very proud of is that, the reason is that we changed it radically in 1996. We moved from multiple verbs to just 2 verbs, an action, and we changed the emphasis of the gameplay from huge numbers of permutations, so that was, and that's why, I was being little bit rude about Simon the Sorcerer, because, it kind of relied on huge numbers of permutations, which you would eventually stumble on the answer. Whereas obviously what we did by giving just one verb and a look was change the emphasis. And what I very much hope is that, maybe in 10, 15, 20 years, people will look back at the new broken sword interface that we put, which we think is very innovative. I'll just finish to tell you one thing. I'm in my offices in the Shambles in York. And recently, I heard a voice as I was locking up behind me of a woman saying, she was talking to her son, and she said, who's a toddler, very, very young. And she said, and darling, this is where revolution are. And one day we'll play broken sword with you. And I turned around and sort of said, hello. And she, obviously it was getting dark, so she thought I was some sort of, strange weirdo. Thankfully, that was broken when she kind of recognized who I was. But what was, extraordinary and, and really humbling is she and so many people say, I played this game with my parents and now I'm playing it with my children. And that is something that we all feel incredibly proud of, not least because with the reforged version, in the way that it's been approached from a control system, or obviously redrawn in 4K in 4K, is, I was asked, what's the industry going to be like in 25 years? And it would be incredibly arrogant to say, oh, people will still be playing Broken Sword. But people were playing Broken Sword 25 years ago. So, maybe we will have the privilege of people actually still wanting to play the game in 25 years. I would be incredibly proud if that were the case.
Interesting that you mentioned simplifying the interface, because I remember playing Maniac Mansion and Zack McCracken as a kid, and you had like tons of options like pull, push, open, use.
The vast majority of which did nothing. And then what they do is they trick you in that, you could have a glass and it might say drink, but actually what you needed to do was throw it.
I remember like, wow, you had to think like how many different ways of using an object can there be, so you have to not use the flashlight, you have to turn on the flashlight. So it became a lot simpler nowadays. That's right. It's actually interesting because in many interviews you mentioned that you misjudged the interface for the mobile versions. Actually, you mentioned that a couple of times.
I think we worked with Ubisoft as our publisher, and Ubisoft were great on the director's cut on the Nintendo DS. And we learned a lot about a touchscreen. It was a completely different approach. And that was one of the reasons why Apple approached us, because obviously the iPhone had a touchscreen. And I think we had a running head start. And certainly I wanted to get out before Monkey Island. And I believe,
know that. Okay.
Yes, no, we were racing to get out before Monkey Island. And Monkey Island spent all their money on a new art style. We didn't have any money, so we spent what we had on really honing the user interface. And I think for the time, it was pretty good. I'm pretty proud of what we came up with. And the game was very well reviewed. I think it's still got a Metacritic of 94%. It was very well reviewed at the time because it felt so fresh and so advanced. So broadly, I would say I'm pretty proud of what we came up with back in the day. It feels very naive now, but for the time, I think it worked well.
Awesome. Well, I guess from my side, we got it covered so far.
Yeah, where can people go to find out about Broken Sword: Shadow of the Templars Reforged?
Well. PC and Mac and Linux, of course, is on Steam and GOG and a number of other great stores. But then we've also got the PlayStation 5 version, which is available, of course, from the PlayStation Store. We have Xbox One and Xbox Series available from Microsoft, and the Switch version is very, very, very close. It's being reviewed by Nintendo at the moment, and will be published, I hope, before the end of October, which I don't know when this is going to go out, but it is currently the 21st of October, so that will give us 10 days. And we're waiting from Nintendo for approval to release.
I mean, since this is our second installment for October, it will probably get out next week.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, then people will be able to say, but it is very, very close. It is very, from our perspective, the game is finished and it's just waiting to be, approved by Nintendo.
Thanks for your time. Almost 2 hours.
Thank you so much for sitting with us.
Excellent. Lovely.
Awesome.
Great. Have a lovely evening. Thank you so much.
You as well.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.